trip logistics. So we're going to talk about a lot of the things that you need to think about when going into the back country. And this is, like I said, just a general guideline here. A lot of this is something that you learn as you go, but also reaching out to me if you have any questions moving forward on planning your trip. So first things first, there's some general guidelines that you need to think about. So every public land, every backcountry access has its own rules and regulations. There's a quick video on Canvas showing you how to navigate some of those websites to get that information. Go ahead and see that. Those details are just supplemental for you and not required for your quiz. So then thinking about the lands and wilderness areas that you're going into and how to plan your trip according to those rules and regulations. Always thinking about backcountry travel considerations such as weather, things like that. A lot of this stuff we're going to get into more detail later. And then fire restrictions. Fire restrictions are important anywhere you go, but they're particularly important when heading into our part of the Sierra that's super dry. And for example, with what we're seeing right now, all the fires and how easy it is and how fast they spread. So like I said, if you want to know more details about fire restrictions and how you learn that and how you get fire permits, there's a small supplemental video that you can use to help navigate that. Outdoor ethics. So again, everything should be based around those leave no trace principles. Not going to go into super detail because we've been over this, and this is also part of your independent study assignment, but keeping in mind that you do need to take all of that into consideration when moving forward. So let's get into some of the specifics. So the things to think about when working on planning your trip. So first things first is who is in your group. A lot of the time when you think about who's in your group, it can help determine all the further questions: where you're going, the trails themselves, whether they're mild or strenuous trails, moderate trails, people's abilities, people's desires, things like that. What I have noticed is if you're trying to get someone interested in the backcountry, always plan their first trip according to what their desires may be. If you want a backpacking and backcountry partner for life, make sure that they're enjoying it. If their first experience is bad, then most of their experiences will be bad following if they're willing to go with you again. So always start well within someone's limitations. Where are you going? So picking that destination and thinking about the time of year that it is, thinking about, like I said, how strenuous the trail is, thinking about if there is water source or not that time of year, snow, things like that. Okay, is there permits? Are permits walk up and get, or are permits lottery? Things like that. Okay, so what will you be doing? Because that's going to take into how you plan for your trip. So if you're on a backcountry trip, that's backpacking solely, like what we've been talking about, then a lot of the gear that we discussed would be beneficial for you. But if you are backpacking to backpacking to a climbing destination or backpacking to a river or something to that effect, it's going to change how you prepare for this trip. Backpacking to a skiing destination, things like that. And when will you be back? And I'm going to talk about this here in a little bit to make sure that we're letting people know what we're doing. So, outdoor ethics, that's weird. I think I went in the wrong direction there. Okay. So before you go, things that you want to look into are weather. And when looking at the weather, there's a really specific way to do it, okay? And again, there's a supplemental video to this one where you can follow along with me how I show you how to look up weather for a specific place in the backcountry. For example, if you're going into Kaiser Wilderness and doing Twin Lakes backpacking trip, which is a really common first-time backpacking trip in our Sierra, then the only way that you would be able to see the temperature would be from like your iPhone would be using Huntington Lake or Shaver Lake. But the peak itself that you're climbing is actually about 2,000 feet probably above Huntington. So the weather is going to be very different. And so you want to be able to check your weather specific to where you're going and where you're going to be at your elevation. Okay. So feel free to see my additional link for that information, as it will give you more detailed guidelines on that. And definitely a great resource, and I would watch just so you know moving forward for any sort of backcountry or travel planning. Make sure that you tell a family or a friend where you're going, what time you're going to be back, the trail, right? I always recommend that people give details to family and friends and then give a range of when they're going to be back. So, for example, if I say, well, I'll be back Sunday to my car, I should be back by noon, okay? But then it's another 2-hour drive until I'll be at reception. So if you hear from me sometime between 2 and 4. If you haven't heard from me by 4, please let Forest Service know that I'm not back to my car, and then they'll decide how to go from there. As far as your itinerary, not only should you have an itinerary, pass that on, but you should also give that detailed itinerary to a friend. Okay, so just saying that my friend went into Kaiser Wilderness and was supposed to be back today is not good enough. An exact trail, going to Twin Lakes, going to George Lakes, whatever the case may be. Stay on the trail, don't get off the trail. And the reason for that is people, when they go missing, they usually get away from where they are, but you will be found in bad weather if you are on the trail and where you're supposed to be. Okay? I also always recommend that you leave itinerary underneath your driver's seat and let your friends and family know. That's also where they're going to look if a car has been parked at the trailhead too long, but don't leave it on in between your steering wheel and the windshield, which I've seen a lot of people do, because it would be really easy for someone to break into your window, look at that, and see how long they have to take whatever they want from your gear. All right, hygiene. So wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. I cannot stress that enough. Washing your hands is so important in the backcountry and doing it right, okay? Disease, infection is spread through dirty hands. We don't want to forget our hygiene when we're in the backcountry. So making sure that you have your biodegradable soap and that you're actually washing your hands and washing your hands diligently throughout the day and night, when you touch your face, things like that, okay? So underneath the fingernails, have clean hands in the backcountry. I suggest bringing wipes. It's really nice to be able to wipe yourself down at night. It's not mandatory. Some people don't, but that's something that I would recommend. Making sure that you're never washing your hands directly into a water source, like I talked about under Leave No Trace principles. And then making sure that you're always this 200 feet away from a water source. Some backcountry travel is only 100 feet, but it's a good rule of thumb to just do 200 feet to make sure that you're not making any issues. Okay? Like I said, hand health, so important. Biodegradable soaps are required, okay? Don't just jump into a lake and stream. Making sure that you are not dirtying a water source, right? So moving water, but also making sure that you're being careful not to put yourself in a situation where something could go wrong. We use treated water for everything that we do in the backcountry. If we drink, we wash our plates, and if we eat with that food, if we wash our hands most of the time, right? I understand if you're on the trail and you can't wash your hands but with filtered water, but it's a good rule of thumb that at least before you go to bed that you wash your hands with filtered clean water. If you get any sort of cuts or scrapes, making sure that you're cleaning those cuts or scrapes with filtered or purified water. Okay? Make sure that you're keeping yourself clean, making sure that you're keeping anything that goes into your mouth clean as well. Health concerns in the backcountry, some things to consider: sunburns, blisters, aches and pains. Let's start with those three, okay? Sunburns, you're typically closer to the sun or more exposed than you would normally be. So, like we talked about before, sunscreen, hats, long sleeves, Sunglasses, all sorts of ways to protect yourself from the sun. If something becomes a second-degree burn, it can become an infection once it blisters if the blister is to rupture. Okay, blisters can be in the form of a second-degree burn, or it can be in the form of some sort of hot spot or rubbing from your shoes. Okay, so making sure that you're protecting. We talked about how important our shoes were in the last lecture. If you feel a blister coming, make sure that you take your shoe off and address that before it becomes a blister. That's what we call a hot spot, so right before it becomes a blister. Moleskin is a good rule of thumb for protecting yourself from blisters. Aches and pains, you're going to be using your body in a different way. You're carrying lots of weight. Make sure that you're prepared for that. Bring your ibuprofen. Take care of yourself. As far as plants in our area, I don't recommend eating plants unless you're well versed in that. So the biggest concern that we have in our area is poison oak. So making sure that you're able to identify poison oak, that whole concept of leaves of three, let it be, those red leaves, right? But the thing is poison oak doesn't have leaves all year round. So making sure that you're prepared for that. If you're like me and you're deathly afraid of poison, deathly allergic to poison oak. In fact, I've had poison oak in my lungs, in my eyes. I've had to have steroid shots. Miserable. Okay, they have poison oak scrubs that you can purchase at REI that allows you to, what poison oak is it's an oil from the plant that gets on your skin and causes an irritation. So if you get exposed to poison oak or are afraid that you might be exposed to poison oak, you can use that poison oak scrub to take the oils off your skin and minimize your reaction. Insects, lots of different options for insects, but the two major ones that you can run into are going to be mosquitoes, so protecting yourself from mosquito bites, as well as ticks. So doing a tick check each day. This is predominantly in the lower country of the back country, but this can be anywhere, okay? And ticks range in seasons. Lyme disease comes from ticks, so if it's the end of the tick season, then each tick is more likely to carry Lyme disease. So you want to make sure to check that, learn how to take ticks out, and have someone check that for you. If you get a tick, it's a good responsibility to get it out within 24 hours. That significantly decreases your chances of getting Lyme disease. And if you feel like it's been in for longer than that, when you get the tick out, put it in a plastic bag, take it to your doctor and have it get tested. I know that seems weird. Altitude sickness can happen to anyone at any elevation. It's when you're not getting enough oxygen to all of your cells. So the higher the altitude, the less pressure, so not as much oxygen is entering your lungs with each breath, okay? The only way to help altitude sickness is to go down. So as soon as you feel like you start getting sick, stop for a minute, try and allow yourself to adjust to that altitude. If not, you'll need to start hiking back down to get more oxygen. Snakes, the only snakes in our area that you need to be aware of are going to be rattlesnakes, okay? Being loud, having trekking poles when you're in rattlesnake country, so if there's a dark spot around, you can poke, and then if the snake starts to rattle or if it strikes, it'll strike the hiking pole instead of you. If at any time you have a snake bite and you think it might be a rattlesnake, that is a rapid evac, okay? Which means that you need to get out of the backcountry as soon as possible without freaking out and monitor the situation. So if that's the case, then you're going to draw a circle around that, mark the time, and get you or your friend out as soon as possible.